Hey folks, welcome back to our Dice Tower preview. I'm Mark.
And I'm Randy.
Today we're taking a look at Miner's Lagoon.
Miner's Lagoon is a self-published game. It plays 2 to 4 players, ages 13 and up, and each game takes between 80 and 160 minutes to play.
Great, we'll put on your miner's hat and let's go mine for resources. Miner's Lagoon is a worker placement game. You're going to be using merchants and miners to gather resources and do all kinds of things. The miners, you're looking for precious metals. You're looking for things like iron, copper, silver, and gold. And you're going to be using equipment, mining equipment to do special tasks. And then, of course, you have your merchants that will be traveling across the lagoon to do different things like buy and sell and enrich your different types of precious metals. And there's just a ton going on here. You really have lots of options and lots of things to think about. Okay, so this is what a typical setup is going to look like. You're going to start with the main board, and there's several tile types and things you're going to place around it. You've got the gallery tiles, you'll place them out on the board. You have your shipment tiles, you'll place those to the side of the board. You have your equipment cards that you'll deal out 6 of them. And then you have your money tokens and you have your precious metal cubes. Along with individual cards, you'll shuffle all those up and prep them for the game board. And of course, you have your round marker, you'll start that at 1.
After setting up the main board, each player is given a player mat and a set of player components in one of 4 colors. Next, the player is given 2 corporation cards, these blue cards. These determine, the player gets to select one of these, and these determine the starting resources and tokens the player is allowed to use. So even though you have a lot of tokens, you're not necessarily allowed to start with all of them. For example, this one says the player starts with $9, 1 iron, 1 gold, and 3 merchants. So he's got more merchant tokens, but he doesn't get to start with all of them. This one says he starts with $10, 1 miner token, and 3 merchants. So choosing between these somewhat sets the strategy for the game.
And it sets the whole feel of the game because already you're making choices right up front.
Exactly. Yep. So next, after choosing one of the 2 corporation cards that he has dealt, the player is dealt 3 of these red objective cards, of which he gets to choose 2. Now these are the in-game scoring conditions, and they're usually worth a fair amount of victory points, so it's important to choose those wisely. And sometimes they're best chosen in combination with the starting corporation cards as well. Each player then puts one of his cubes on the victory point track at 0. And then you choose one player to be the starting player, and starting players might be a little bit deceptive, but they get this island selection token, and they get to start the initial round by choosing which island they're going to start their actions on.
Now, each round is divided into 3 phases. First, you have the island selection phase, then you have the action phase, and then the end of round phase. So, first off, what you're going to do, the first player will decide which compass direction they would like to start at. You have 4 quadrants, basically, that you can pick from being the first player. And you're going to put your cube in one of those 4 positions. And that is going to dictate the player order once all the cubes have been placed. It's labeled 1, 2, 3, 4. And that will be the player order for that round.
Next is the action phase. In most cases, each player is given an opportunity to perform 2 actions before control passes to the next player. Each time they perform an action, they must put down 1 or more of their tokens. Now, it's important to recognize there are 2 different types of workers. There are merchant workers and there are miner workers. And these are associated with different actions, and they cannot be exchanged. There are certain spots that are only for miners and certain spots that are only for merchants. Now, you're not allowed, once you've performed an action on one of the islands, you're not allowed to perform that action again. You can move to a different island and perform a similar action there, but you cannot, once your worker is in a space, for example, if I played here, I couldn't, in a later turn, put down another action or another one of my workers there. If another player has already put down one of their markers, one of their merchants, in a merchant spot, and you want to perform that same action, you must put down 1 additional merchant in order to invoke that action. So if they've already put down 1, you must put down 2, and now if the blue player wants to play in this particular location, he must put down 3 merchants to invoke that action.
Now the exception there is miners, right? Miners, you can play as many, it doesn't matter.
Absolutely true, and that's the key, and Mark will talk more about that in a bit, but in these miner locations, you can put down as many as you want to, no matter how many miners previous players have already put down there.
All right, first let's talk about these miner workers. And you know what? These tokens or miner hats are super cool, and they're like my favorite of the workers anyway. So you really have a couple options with the miners. You're going to be going to the mining spots basically to mine for precious metals, and you're looking at the galleries that are here to see what types you're going to mine for. And if you choose a particular gallery that's face down, then you can do that. You have to flip it over, and whatever it is, it might be empty. That's what you're going to get. So there is a bit of a gamble there. And there's ways to place those, which the merchants will be placing galleries.
Right.
So you never know what might be there. You know, people might goat you into picking, an empty cart. So, but you can divide up your miners however you want. You could put 4 miners in the spot and grab 1 of each type that happens to be there, or 2 of one and 1 of another, whatever your combination. But you have to call it out up front. You have to tell folks what you're going to do. And then you have cards over here that are equipment cards. And there's a spot where you can go buy equipment cards, but that again is done by a merchant, not by a miner. But once you have one of those equipment cards in your tableau area, then you can activate that as a potential action as well. And there's all kinds of different possibilities here. There's a lot of, and they're not just actions to perform. Some you just pay for and you get a bunch of victory points. So there's a lot of different options in these construction equipment that is really valuable throughout the game.
And one of the trade-offs with the miners is that the galleries at the top are the ones that easiest to get to. So when you put down a miner, it just takes 1 miner to get 1 resource from any of those galleries.
But level 2.
But level 2 actually requires you to put down a pair of miners, and you don't have to mine everything at the top level before you get to the second level, but it's much more expensive. And so that's a trade-off. You might say, well, there's some cheap stuff up here that I can get. So in this case, I could get spend 2 miners and get a silver and a copper, or I could use this pair of miners to get a gold. So that's a trade-off you want to take into account when you're putting your miners down. Now, the gallery tiles determine what type of resources your miners are able to mine. Fortunately, though, there are 2 spots, one on each of the southern islands, that allow you to draw 2 gallery tiles and put them in place. Now, this has a couple of benefits. First, when you draw the 2 tiles, you will look at them, and what they show is, for example, this says this is a gallery that has 3 gold on it. This one has 2 iron on it. And you have the option of putting that at the top level of any of the 6 spots, so either of the galleries on either island. When you do so, you will push down what's already there. Any level 1 gallery that's already in place, you'll push that down to level 2. And if both level 1 and level 2 are in place, the level 2 one gets pushed off the board and removed, and the level 1 goes down to level 2. So this allows you to potentially get more resources that you don't currently have access to. So if you said, in this case, we don't have any, well, we have a level 2 iron deposit here. I want this to be at level 1, so I don't have to spend as much to get iron, so I might push this one of these spots and make it more easy for me to utilize. Now, it also has another benefit. When you place these down, you have the option of placing them face up so everybody can see them, or face down. If you place at least one face up, the other one face down, you will get $2 from the bank. If you place them both face up, you'll get $3 from the bank. But you say, well, why would I possibly put them face down so that somebody else doesn't know what's there? You might put them face down because another option is an empty cart. Or you might just say, well, I'm going to put this face down because it's a resource that isn't currently out there I really want, but I don't have another action, so I'm going to put this face down, and Mark might not go for it if he doesn't know what's there. He might think it's empty, but it might be a vein rich in gold.
Right.
So this allows you to have some influence on the galleries here. Once any of the galleries or any of the gallery tiles have been completely mined and are empty, that tile is removed from the games, and any of the, if there's a lower tile here, it moves up and becomes more easy to access. So that's those are the spots that allow you to add tiles. Now you might actually say, well, I want more miners or I want more merchants. How do I get those? Also on the southern islands, on one of the islands there's an action spot that allows you to spend money and get an additional merchant. And the same thing for one of the other islands allows you to spend money and get additional miners. So these, if you have played worker placement games before, you know that sometimes it's worth investing early and getting more tokens or more workers to spend. But we also, as we played, found out that that's not required to get victory points. So your strategies
and it's also important to note, as you move along the different rounds, you have to pay for these workers. You have to feed them.
Yes, so on every third round, it's a good thing you brought this up now, every third round you must pay $1 to the bank for every 2 workers you have, workers being either miners or merchants. And if you don't, there are penalties in terms of victory points. So if you're going to accrue a lot of workers, merchants or miners, it's important to be able to, quote unquote, feed your people. In this case, you're just paying their wages.
Now, like a lot of worker placements, there's also the spot to turn 2 resources into a different type, or one other resource. So you have that option available, and then you have artifacts. And this is taking 4 of a specific type of precious metal and turning it into a monument or a special pyramid token, which turns into an artifact. And this artifact goes on your player board and is worth 3 points at the end of the game. However, there is another spot on the lower islands to ship and make some money and victory points when you ship these artifacts off. And sometimes they come up in the shipping tokens or tiles that you will access throughout the game. And if you do, you know, there's that trade-off. You're gonna get a little bit more money and maybe a little bit less points for it, but it might be at a crucial point in the game where you need money, but you're still going to benefit some victory points from these artifacts.
Now, the shipping action allows you not only to ship artifacts, but also unenriched resources.
Yes.
We'll talk about enriching resources in a second. But these tokens, these tiles rather, allow you to take advantage of shipping either of those.
Right.
And you might say, well, I can use the unenriched resources, I can enrich them and get more value later. But again, as you said, there's that trade-off. Maybe you need money right now, and maybe you need some quick turnaround and maybe a little bit of victory points. The shipping actions are the way you do that.
Yep.
Unenriched resources can be enriched, and the way you do this is there are 2 spots, one on each of the southern islands, that allow you to take up to 3 of the tokens that you have, and these are the unenriched resources that you have recently mined, and put these in the enrichment center, in the center of the board. You can put up to 2 of the same type of token, so if I say, well, I want to put 3 up there, I could put up to maybe 2 silver and 1 copper, but I couldn't put 3 copper out there at the same time. What this does is that when we do this, we turn in a certain number of these resources, and then we put our own player cubes at the very top, the 0th level of the appropriate column. And the columns are limited to 4 items or 4 resources in one of these things. Now, the reason we use these instead of the tokens we used before is that we can keep track of whose resource it is being enriched. So if I turn one of my silver here, I put it up here at the 0th level, I know that it's mine. Other people know that as well. Well, what's the benefit of that is that at the end of every round, each item each token is moved 1 level down, indicating it's been enriched by 1 level. If it's enriched all the way to 4 and we try to move it to 5, basically it gets over toasted and it goes away. But in the meantime, those are very valuable. What we can do is also use those spots down there not only to put our resources into the enrichment center for enriching, but we can also buy up to 2 resources there. Not only our own, but other people's.
You can steal it right out from under.
Right. Well, we don't steal though because we actually
pay for it.
So if I were to let one of my, say, gold resources here, I put it in here earlier, and after 3 rounds, it's at level 3. I can buy that by using that action and bring it into my onto my player board here in the appropriate spot, and that's going to allow me to fulfill a deal later on. We'll talk about deals in a second as well. If it's mine, I get 1 victory point each time I take one of my resources that I put there previously and harvest it, basically. If it's somebody else's, let's say that's Mark's resource at level 3 in the gold column, I pay him 3. I pay him whatever level that is. So if it's a level 4, I pay him 4. And he also gets a victory point. So there's that trade-off. He may have put that there for his own benefit. He's saying, I really need a level 4 gold. I might steal that out from underneath him, but he gets some benefit.
There's some benefit, but you are swiping it from people.
I am. Now, it's also useful to say, that's just a way to make victory points. You just harvest or mine a lot of resources, throw them in the enrichment center, and use actions to buy them back. And that's a good way to generate resources, or not resources, but victory points to maybe keep up with other people.
Now let's talk about deals. And you're going to move your meeple into that action, and you can either draw a deal or close a deal that you may already have. And these deals are going to use those refined precious metals that you've been working on. So you might have a level 4, or you might have a combination of a level 1 and a level 2. Just depends on the deal. And once you close a deal, then you gain the victory points. And these are worth quite a bit. These are really worth doing. And it really does chain, right? You have to refine in order to close deals. And you know, you're going to use your meeple out here to do those particular actions. However, here's a case that we ran into with the equipment cards where you can actually have a miner close the deal using a bulldozer, right?
Right, exactly. So this is where the equipment becomes very valuable, not just to get the victory points that you get when you initially purchase it, but instead of, with the bulldozer card I had drawn or purchased, instead of spending a merchant on the board to invoke the close a deal action, I was able to spend a remaining miner that I happened to have on this card to not only close a deal, but also get an additional victory point for doing so.
Right, super powerful actually. So there's a lot of variation and a lot of chaining between the different actions and how they play off of each other.
Right. The last type of action you can perform is called the Deport Island action. This allows you to place one of your merchants on this location and move your ship to one of the other islands where you can perform your next action on that island. Right. So you'll use this fairly frequently throughout the game.
A lot, actually.
Now there is a special case for this. If you perform the Deport Island action at the very first turn of a round, it means you have to forego your second action for that turn. The reason for this is it prevents you from undermining one of the other players who actually chose one of the other islands during the island selection phase. But otherwise, Deport Island is treated like any other action. Right. Now, the players continue taking their 2 actions and going around the table until all players have passed or can't perform actions anymore. Right. After that's done, then the end of round action or phase begins.
Cleanup time.
It is. Now, during this phase, the first thing you do is you enrich all the materials here in the enrichment center by 1. You'll move each of these tokens down by 1 level. If you've moved it beyond level 4, then that resource goes out of the game. You'll check to see if this round is one of the multiples of 3, and if it is, you must pay your resources.
Feed your workers.
If you cannot do that, then you take penalty points in terms of victory points. Then each player will take back all of their workers, their merchants and their miners, and also take back their ships and their marker on the island selection compass there. And they'll pass on the island selection marker to the next player clockwise and prepare for the next round. Now, if you've reached round 15, or if a player has gotten 30 victory points, that will trigger the end of the game. Right. Now, you might say, well, why do we have all these additional spots here? Just because a player has 30 victory points doesn't guarantee he's going to win the game, because what players have concealed in their hands are their objective cards. And that can push a player, maybe not the player who triggered the end of the game, but one of the other players well beyond 30.
Right, and you have artifacts too that can continue to give you more victory points if you've collected a number of those through the game.
If you collected them and didn't ship them, you'll get 3 per artifact. And you'll tabulate the number of victory points, and
whoever has the most wins the game. All right, folks, just a reminder once again, this has been a Dice Tower paid preview, and everything you've seen here has been in prototype form. So keep a close eye on the campaign for any changes that still may occur. Now, with that said, we play a lot of worker placement games, and I really felt like the mining theme really comes through pretty strong here. And I love the little miner token hats. These are really cool.
Now, I love worker placement games, and I tease Mark that this was right up my alley because colored cubes, I love colored cubes in games. Now, the other thing I like about this game is, unlike a lot of worker placement games where if somebody else has played in a spot before you, you are shut out of that. You cannot do that. This has a different mechanic in the sense that if somebody has played in a spot beforehand, I can play, at least for merchants, I can play 1 additional merchant, and even though it's more expensive, at least I still get to perform that action. So that was nice.
Definitely, and I like how some of the different actions actually chain off of each other and do different things. So that's pretty interesting as well. But folks, ultimately, if this looks like a game that would be of interest to you, I'm sure they'd appreciate your support.
Absolutely.
So I think that's it from us. And until next time, we'll see you at the table.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.